was checking my name tag just to be sure I'm who this is. I thought it said Ubon Pardo, but it's actually Bob. It's great to be with you.
Thank you.
Great to have you. At my age, it's great to be anywhere. I asked Bill what he wanted me to talk about tonight, and he said, whatever you want to. Well, one of the things I'd like to talk about is a fishing trip I had to Canada. And the other is duck hunt down in Arkansas, where you have to stand around in 4 feet of water waiting for the ducks to come in. And they just come floating straight down because there's no other way to get on water. Oh, but that's getting off track, isn't it? Well. That didn't work right. That doesn't become effective until tomorrow.
You want me to turn it around for you?
No, that's okay.
There's a little light over here.
Okay, let's talk about the push first. We were tasked to take out North Vietnam's only steel mill. And we started trying to hit the target on March the 1st, 1967. Well, it didn't work. The weather was too bad. Too bad on the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th. We were getting tired of being shot at so much because they were really protected the steel mill. They had 800 artillery guns. I'm not responsible. I have nothing to do with it. But finally, on March the 10th, it looked like we were going to make it. And the F-105s always went in ahead of us, and we were there to protect them and also to put bombs on the target. And in the heat of battle, things sometimes get a little bit jumbled up. About 40 miles from the target, the number 2 man in our formation was hit by anti-aircraft fire. And they had, at last count, 800 guns at the steel mill, within 5 miles of the steel mill. They had 5 portable surface-to-air missile sites there. So as you can tell, it was very well defended. As I said, the number 2 man got hit about 40 miles from the target, and I got hit as we were pulling off the target. And when you get hit by an aircraft fire, there's not much doubt about what it is. My backseater thought we got hit with about 85 millimeter, but it made a big enough thump that you could feel it throughout the airplane. On the way out, we noticed that number 2 and myself were both losing fuel greater than what was going through the engine. And so it finally became obvious to us we needed to get some altitude. So we climbed up to 30,000 feet so that when we did flame out, we'd glide a little ways. The F4 glided at about a 45-degree angle, if you can call that a glide. That's more like spring. But we kept going. And finally, I said, there's got to be something that I could do to help this guy get out of here. He says, Laos is just down the road a few miles. And so I had him lower his tail hook, you know, like the Navy uses on aircraft carriers to take the wire and stop. Well, that's what we were using. Put his hook in the middle of my windshield, which was not made out of tempered glass as I thought. It was just plain glass. And started pushing. Well, he had been coming down at about 3,000 feet a minute, and that cut that in half to 1,500 feet a minute. And I said, okay, that's great. You just double the distance we're going to get him. About halfway down, 15,000 feet or so, my backseater, who can look over my shoulder into the front cockpit and see some of the engine instruments, said, you might want to ease the power off on that left engine because it's really getting hot. Well, maximum temperature is 600 degrees centigrade. And about 1 minute later, he says, Bob, that thing's pegged out at 1,000 degrees. Shut it down. So we shut down the left engine. Continue to push on one engine. And I said, we're not going to make it. I said, I've got to start that engine up. Well, all of you pilots in here know once you shut one down from an engine fire, you don't want to crank it back up because you could have yourself a very nice little explosion. But we just left it and said, we'll just get what we get. And sure enough, we barely made it to a little bit of jungle in northern Laos. And then we all four ejected and were very shortly picked up by the rescue helicopters, which were already on their way up there. Well, they picked up 3 of the guys and they got to me and I said, where are you going? I'm back here in the dirt. He said, well, we've already got a load, so the next helicopter will be here very shortly. Very shortly turned out to be another 40 minutes. I had been an escape and evasion instructor for about 10 years. And I thought, boy, this will not look good on my resume if I get myself captured. So I managed to evade until this great big jolly green came in there and plucked me out of the jungle. And when I got out of the helicopter, I gave a little PJ in the back end. And that's another thing. He says, sit over here on the bench. Handed me an M16, which I knew absolutely nothing about. He says, if I need you, I'll call you. So when I got out of the helicopter, I gave him a $100 bill. I said, buy those 2 guys up front a steak dinner tonight. Well, it's funny because about 40 years later, I got in touch with one of the helicopter pilots. And he says, he never took us to dinner.
Wow.
But I guess, like they say, all's well that ends well. And it did end well. And of course, when I got back to my base, I was told that the commanding general of the 7th Air Force was going to court-martial me. Okay, so what's he going to court-martial me for? He's just throwing away a good airplane. I said, the airplane was done for. That wasn't a good airplane. Well, my boss heard about that, and he had been on vacation on R&R. And when he came back to Ubon and found out that the commanding general was going to court-martial him, he jumped in his jet, went down to 7th Air Force, and they had a nice long conversation. And the general finally said, okay, here's the deal. You guarantee me that he will not receive any recognition whatsoever, and I won't court-martial. And he said, done deal. He got up, he came back to Ubon, that's that. Well, we didn't want any recognition. We just wanted to get our buddies home. But anyway. A lot of people say we should not have even been over there. Well, I think we should have. South Vietnam wanted to live under democracy, which they were doing. And there's just nothing quite like living in a democracy. Everybody gets a vote. You're free. And we could have won that war anytime we wanted to, if we could have just gotten our commander-in-chief to turn loose the B-52s, which he would not do. Thank goodness that's about the time he went out of office. We got a new commander-in-chief. He said, send in the B-52s. 10 days later, the war was over. That could have happened at the beginning of the war, and we wouldn't have had to lose 58,000 troops. My friend Thomas Jefferson says peace are those short periods of time when everyone stands around reloading. And if you think back of the time between the end of World War I and the beginning of World War II, the Germans were fast reloading. So, maybe I ought to talk about the fishing trip. Does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask?
How many fish did you catch?
One trout.
Were there snakes where you were standing in the duck water or waiting for the ducks to fall?
No.
Oh.
However, when I was on the ground in the jungle, that's a different story.
I know the snakes.
They got some what they call one-steppers. It affects your
Nervous system.
nervous system.
Great, yeah.
One of those bites you, you take one step and drop dead. Crates, that's what they're called, crates. And, which one of you guys lived off base and ended up with a cobra in your house? Was that any of you guys? I can remember hearing about that. That would have absolutely scared me to death.
Came up through the drain.
Surely there's one or two questions in here. Yes, sir.
What made you think of the tail hook routine?
Yeah, that's good.
Wasn't anything else.
Nothing.
I had thought about coming in underneath him and giving him a piggyback. And I got about a foot from his belly and suction started to draw me up, and I thought, that's gonna break the canopy. And I'm not gonna like ejecting through a broken canopy. That's gonna be very hard on my forearms. And so I backed out from under him, and when I was backing out from under him, I saw the tail hook. And I thought, let's try that. So he put the hook down, and I put it in the middle of the windshield, and away we went. Like, I don't know if I mentioned it, but we got, down to 10,000 feet. And left engine caught fire, so we had to shut that down, and we did the last portion on one engine. And it worked.
How many times did tail hook come off your windshield?
Quite a few. It didn't want to stay. And some of you guys being crew chiefs, you know that the rain removal system was down below the windshield, a little very small metal area. Blew hot air on the windshield for de-icing or rain removal. I put it down there and it stuck like glue. It was good. So instead of it only staying on there 10 seconds, now it's staying on there 30 seconds at a time, and we were really making hay.
I was wondering if there was anything in your flying career that made you think that was gonna work. Had anything happened in your past to,
Oh.
I mean, I'm just thinking the risk of
No.
trying to make that maneuver.
I didn't have any choice. When I was 18 years old, my dad and I were building up some reload ammunition and just having a conversation. And he said, Bobby, if you ever have a friend that needs help, help him. So before the event even took place, I was committed to help him. Oh, come on, one more at least.
Did you guys blow off your wing tanks or centerline tanks, whatever you had? Did he blow?
Yeah, we jettisoned them. They were flight. Except in this instance, my centerline tank wouldn't go. So that created a little drag problem, but didn't have very much of an adverse effect.
Did you notice any cracks in the windshield?
Yes, sir.
I wonder how you did
A whole bunch. It looked kind of like a spider web.
Yeah.
But once we moved the hook down onto the rain removal area, that was the end of that. So I couldn't see where I was going anyway with an airplane in front of me.
So, sir, how did you communicate which way, up and down, right, left? You using azimuth, degrees, what were you doing?
I just told him to fly as smooth as ever flown.
Straight ahead.
Just straight ahead, smooth as you can fly.
There you go.
Too dark.
Yes, sir.
Were you in contact with anyone else? Did anyone else know what predicament you were
Too
in?
busy to talk to anybody else. It was amazing. I didn't realize it, but we had an airborne command post. And so all the time we were in on the raid, they were listening to our conversations and so forth. And that's why they were able to get the helicopters headed our way before we even got out of the airplanes. Worked real good.
Did your backseater think you were crazy?
He said that a number of times. Yes, sir.
I know with the B-52s, they kind of flew the same routes all the time for some reason, politicians. Was that true with the F-4s, or was you limit on what you could bomb and what you couldn't bomb?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. We were.
That'd be an all-day story, but.
No. One of our, high-level State Department guys.
Well, you cleaned that up nicely, sir.
He went to the Pentagon to get our target set for the following week, every week. And he would take it to the Swiss Embassy and ask them to send it to the Swiss Embassy in North Vietnam, in Hanoi, so that they could move the people out of the area that we were going to bomb. It didn't exactly work that way, because when we would go there to do the bombing, there'd be so many anti-aircraft guns you couldn't count them. It just allowed them to put more guns exactly where we were gonna be. Yes, sir.
What base did the rescue helicopters come out of? Did you pick you up on the job?
Knock on Phnom.
In
KP?
Yeah, KP.
Our older brother was up there, you know, for the rescue helicopter.
Well, that's the prettiest airplane I've ever seen.
How many years were you in, sir?
20 years. At that time in my life, we had two kinds of commissions, a reserve commission and a regular commission. And I was a reserve officer. And I had never flown with the reserves. I only flew with the United States Air Force. And when my 20 years was up, they said, "We'll see you later," and sent me on my way.
Did you continue flying, sir?
You bet.
What?
Learjets mostly. I went into corporate aviation and flew 31 years there.
Good, nice.
So what it boils down to is I've never had to work a day in my life. All I've done is fly. And the nice thing was I was finally getting ready for my second retirement, and one of my charter customers says, "I want you to buy me an airplane and set up the flight department for me." And I said, "Oh, wait a minute. You've always told me if it flies or floats, you rent it. You don't buy it." He says, "Well, I've sold 3% of my stock and I'm now a billionaire. I can afford anything I want." So he said, "Go buy me an airplane." So we got him a Falcon 50EX, which is a miniature 727. 3-engine dude. Boy, it was some kind of airplane. All kinds of magic. And it's amazing how comfortable it feels to earn $10,000 a month and not get shot at.
Yeah.
How long were you at Luke? What was your position there?
Assistant ops officer, and I was there for 3 years. Was it 4? 3 or 4. And we were running an instructor's school at the time. We were teaching instructors how to instruct.
I think you were there when I was there. What, 73, 4, somewhere in there?
Yeah, it would have been.
That's why I went to Ubon from there, from Luke, twice. So
Well, you didn't get it right the first time?
I didn't know if you were aware of that, but that's what we were doing at Ubon. That's how I got there, was T.D. White and Luke, so 73. Then they gave me orders to karate. 2 years, I didn't mind.
Sir,
Yes.
did you ever suffer any repercussions later in your career from what happened?
Well, actually, no. However, I was in a golf tournament with some of the guys that I flew with over there. And this guy asked me, he says, what kind of an award did you get for doing the push? I said, "We didn't get anything but a good chewing out." He says, "Well, I'm gonna fix that." And he says, "I've been working for John Tower of Texas as his military aide, and I'll take care of that and nothing flat." He called me a week later. He said, "You've been approved for the Air Force Cross."
All right.
Good.
And then, well, not good. Then the Air Force got involved and downgraded it to Silver Star. Got to take a little of the good with the bad. Okay, whose turn is it? I've been up here long enough.
Get your arm out. Get your arm away. Get your arm away. I know you're thinking, your mic's working. Go ahead.
I was there before he was there. I was the only logistics guy.
His mind's always going. I know something.
Come on, no fist fights back there.
Of all the aircraft people in the Air Force, it's what you
Well, the question was, what was my favorite aircraft? I flew a lot of different airplanes, 7 different fighters in the Air Force. And I used to say, whichever one I was flying at the time. And then I got to thinking, well, maybe I owe the F4 a little more than that. So I would have to say the F4, well, it's still an argument because for a year I flew the F-106 out of Loring, Maine, way up in the cold country. That is the slickest flying airplane there is. I mean, I would fly target missions where I would be the target, and I'd fly way up to over the piney woods and turn around and head back and put it in about half afterburner. And it put out such a plume of fire behind me, guys could pick me up from 180 miles out. Of course, an infrared system cannot read range. So you have to always stay below what the guys have told you the target altitude is. And then when you get in close and pick him up on the radar scope, then you can pop up and shoot him down. I ought to have my wife come up here and answer questions on what it's like to be married to me. But I won't. Yes, sir?
Would you honor some of us with your autograph?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Well, I'm not authorized to adjourn the meeting, but I'll just put the microphone down.
Thank you, sir.